Hell, this is Bad Vibes. Today's video is on exes, whether friends, in-laws, or someone that you used to date. These types of stories can be triggering, so viewer discretion. Now onto the stories. For some context, I've been friends with this guy for a little over 3 years. When I first met him, I thought he was hilarious, kind, intelligent, and overall, a really interesting person. Everyone thought that of him, and they still do. He's loved by his peers and a very well-known member of our community. This is important later. We didn't become best friends till a few months into our friendship. One day we were joking around and we had a general connection with each other. I never had such a good time with someone before. It's one of those moments when you're with someone and you slightly laugh and can't breathe. It was fun. When I first met him, his ex-girlfriend warned me about him. I was pretty close to her, but I still couldn't believe anything she said about him. I just assumed that she was a vengeful ex. She claimed that he went far past her sexual boundaries, was cruel to her at times, and one time attempted to drown her. She said that they went swimming and he put all of his weight on top of her and kept holding her under the water. Once she came up, he would do it again and again. They broke up after that. I ignored this, as I said earlier, chalked it up to her having an extreme dislike for him. One day he brags to me about how he got away with relentlessly bullying this kid in high school. He tried to talk him into suicide, but the kid would only go as far as to cut himself, so he gave up after getting bored. He thought this was hilarious and he was laughing while telling me about it. I was very disturbed by this, and I never seen him act so cruel before. Another time, we went hiking. This was his idea. The trail we were on was very popular, so there were a lot of people there. This one woman stood out to him, I guess, because he kept commenting on how gorgeous she was. She was with this man, who I guess was her boyfriend or husband, and I just thought how the whole thing was strange. Afterwards, we went out to eat inside of this plaza, and he guided the conversation to the topic of sex. We each slowly opened up about what we liked, and it was pretty normal until he brought up his true interests. He said he fantasized about kidnapping, raping, and murdering a girl. He told me in detail how he basically wanted to torture some lady and commit necrophilia along with other fucked up stuff. Once we got done eating, he kept joking about going back to that girl and doing that all to her. He brought it up numerous times throughout the day, and it was apparent he wasn't joking. It was more of a suggestion at that point. I distanced myself from him after that, and we kind of drifted apart as we had got separate jobs and we didn't see each other much. I went to this party one night, and guess who was there? The creepo. At the beginning, I mentioned how everyone loves him. He is an active member of the community and goes to church. Plus his new occupation adds to the facade. He started talking to me and he seemed normal per usual. I thought he changed because of how convincing he was. I'm sure you think you could tell, but I'm telling you, this guy could easily fool you. He told me how he joined the local PD. Yep, he's now a cop, and I was shocked by this. He always mentioned wanting to join law enforcement and would never say he had bad intentions. Maybe he was genuine about helping people, or maybe it was just a cover. Who knows, but either way, he shouldn't have that authority. We started talking again and we hung out a few times. He seemed completely normal and kind, so I assumed that everything was alright until he mentioned his cousin's death and talked about him so coldly, it doesn't seem to feel sad about it at all. He also spoke of his current girlfriend in a detached manner. During our friendship, he told me how he abused dogs and killed others when he was younger, and recently he bragged about kidnapping a sex worker and scaring her. Anytime I asked about what he meant by scaring her, he became hostile and refused to go into further detail. He'd always loved going into detail, so I'm curious about why he isn't about this all of a sudden. On New Year's, we went to a bar and he nearly killed a guy. He literally beat the guy till he was choking on his own blood. and didn't stop until I said the poor guy could die. I tried stopping him physically, but he's a lot stronger than I am. He turned around with this blank expression on his face and casually went back into conversation. I reported him to the police anonymously, but I haven't heard anything back from them. I'm convinced he's a psychopath or something along those lines. Update: I contacted the FBI in my state and they said that they were going to look into it. After the conversation, I have high hopes that this will be resolved. It sounded promising. I have more stories about the horrible shit that he's done if anyone's interested. I've also received a lot of comments asking how I ignored the red flags for so long, and I don't have an answer for that. It was stupid for me to believe everything he said, and I should have listened to my friend, his ex. So when I moved where I live now, I was like 10. One of my first friends I made quickly, and they became my best friend. We did everything together for years. We were never apart. While in middle school, I started staying over at her house a lot since my parents were getting a divorce. So my friend's family had a hot tub in the backyard, and her family always had friends over and would drink and hang out in the backyard. So on those nights, my friend and I weren't allowed downstairs. We had to stay in her room, which was fine with us. My friend always acted strange about it when we would go downstairs to get something to eat or drink and hurry back upstairs. There was a few times I had seen outside and noticed that her dad was all over other women and her mom was all over other men, and most of them were completely nude. I just blew it off like whatever. Everyone was different, and obviously I learned very fast that they were nudists and swingers. Every weekend they had parties in their backyard. I didn't care. Everyone likes to be naked. Well, once we went into high school, we started using the hot tub when no one else was over. And one time her dad came home from work and she started freaking out, hurrying to get out and telling me to hurry up and wrap up in a towel and act like we weren't in it. So we did, and her dad caught us. He was pissed, but I didn't get why. Well, he told us that we could use it when we wanted to, but we couldn't get in with anything on, not even a bathing suit. I found that weird, but was like, okay, whatever, and asked my friend why we had to be naked in the hot tub. She told me that it will mess with the chlorine and stuff if we wore stuff. Alright, I'm a dumb teenage girl who just wanted to lay in the hot tub. There are so many times that I had seen her dad sitting in the kitchen looking out the window at us at random times. I figured he was just making sure that we weren't being dumb or going to hurt anything. Well, one day we were in a hot tub while no one was home. Her dad got off work early that night, and so he came outside completely naked and got in the hot tub with us, inches away from me. I freaked out so bad that I went home and didn't go to their house again. I never told my parents or anything, as I'm already dealing with a divorce and being upset with my mom wanting my siblings and not me, leaving me with my dad while he was going through a very extreme manic episode. I stayed friends with the girl and she always stayed at my house with me, but things got bad. She told me her brother was touching her and that she didn't like it, and her dad was abusive. I witnessed him try to legit bite her thumb off. She ran away and was put into foster care for 2 years. She told everyone that she had made everything up so that she could go back home with her family instead of living going house to house constantly. She lived with her parents until she graduated, and then she moved away across the country. I don't blame her. I still feel bad for everything she went through. But anyway, my ex-friend's weird ass dad. Let's not ever meet again. This wasn't a scary encounter, but it was one of my most frightening moments. When I was 5 and my brother was 9, my mom, after divorcing my father, got into a relationship with this man named Mike. At first, she didn't tell us that they were dating and just said that he was a good friend of hers, so Mike would come and visit us daily. Soon after, we found out that they were dating because my brother caught them making out on the couch, and he came to wake me up to show me. After my mom got caught by us, she started tearing up, saying that she didn't want us to be mad at her because she found a man after weeks of divorcing my dad. Of course, we tried to understand, but again, we were kids, so we barely had a clue on what was happening. Way too many emotions happening at once for a kid me and my brother's age to understand. After about a month, he started to move in with us, slowly but surely. That's when we started seeing something off about him. He was already in a relationship with another woman and had a daughter with her, but yeah, he was also seeing my mom at the time. My mom also knew that he was with someone else and had a child. Mike's daughter would sometimes come over every 2 weeks to spend time with her dad and me since we were friends. She was about a year or so younger than me. Anyways, so Mike, over a couple of months, started to give up on everything and just depend on my mom to do everything, like quitting his job, getting drunk every night, etc. He was also allergic to cats, and we had a cat named Romeo at the time. Romeo wasn't the kind of cat that loved attention, more like he was just interested in sleeping and eating, like most cats. But every time Mike saw Romeo, he yelled at him, even if Mike was the one to approach Romeo. When I mean yell at him, I mean full on threaten to shoot the cat, just cause of its existence. Mike would also make me and my brother clean up his beer cans all over the table and throw his cigarettes away. Obviously, you could tell that this dude was pretty much drunk 24/7, which was a red flag, especially when you're living with kids. Sometimes I would hear yelling and screaming at night from him yelling at my mother. I have an imprinted image in my mind of my mom cowering on the ground with fear and him standing up leaning over her screaming. He never hit her or anything, just screaming some fake BS that wasn't even a big deal to be yelling about. Well, after a while we got tired of his shit and my mom got back together with my dad and we moved out when Mike was out somewhere at a bar around 2 blocks down. So we packed our stuff and left, which when he came home at some point, there was nothing in the house, but probably silverware and toilet paper because we were nice enough to leave some. Well, after we moved out, my mom noticed his truck always behind her car when we were going somewhere. He even came onto our property at night to peep through my mom's bedroom window to see if my father was home, which most of the time at night he wasn't because he was a nurse who worked the night shift. Sometimes I would even see his car parked in the middle of the road that we lived on, and he would walk up to our house and peep through my window as well to see if I was up. I had night terrors as a kid, and most nights I would be afraid to go to sleep. We never saw him after we got the police to follow behind us to see if he was following us and arrest him for stalking. He did ruin some stuff for me that I see on a daily basis, like storage units. He had one of those, and now every time I see them, it just gives me flashbacks of when me and him were in the car and we went to his storage unit. He got his old Wii out and let me borrow it. I do miss him when he was a good person and was nice to us, but I guess people change. I'm 18 and my ex-boyfriend is 23. We dated for 3 months and then 2 months ago, I decided we weren't compatible for various reasons. A major one of which was that he didn't respect my religious beliefs. I'm a Christian and the main part he didn't understand was that I wouldn't sleep with him before marriage. Our relationship seemed good, although it was my first relationship, so I didn't have a lot to base it off of, but he seemed like a good person. Our breakup was amicable enough, and he wanted to stay friends, which pretty much consisted of small talk via texting, meeting up occasionally, etc. More like acquaintances than real friends, I suppose. But the point is, we didn't have a falling out, and there weren't any particular red flags before about 2 weeks ago when we had a bit of an argument. It was a Sunday, so I went to church as usual, and to my surprise, he came to meet me afterwards. We set off, walking back to my house, and he rolled his eyes at me and said something along the lines of, "I can't believe someone like you would buy into rubbish like that." Honestly, even if he was joking, the fact that he wasn't even making an effort to tolerate my beliefs, which he could have said nothing about them. It bugged me a little, and I told him so. His response? Yeah, well, I'm not gonna like it if it's the reason why I haven't stuck my dick in you yet. I wasn't at all prepared for him to say that, and I was just shocked and disgusted that he was being like this after we had tried to have a normal friendship, so I just walked away from him. I couldn't think of anything to say, so I just sped up and walked away. He caught up with me and tried to put his arm around me, telling me to be honest, because he knew I wanted him. I pretty much shoved him off and ran the rest of the way back home. Almost straight afterwards, he texted me an apology, which I ignored for a while as I was trying to calm down. Then replied to with, "Fine, just please don't say things like that in the future." And I generally believed that he wouldn't. A little dumb, I know, but he had always seemed so pleasant before. His apology seemed genuine, and I'll confess, I may have had a soft touch where he was concerned, seeing as I cared about him and had regretted breaking up with him a few times since we broke up. Anyway, things settled back down and were normal for about 3 days. Then he messaged me saying that he still wanted me. Before I could reply, he sent an apology and I reaffirmed that I only wanted to be friends with him now. That's when he decided to flip the crazy switch on me. I received a string of texts telling me that a platonic relationship wasn't gonna work. We should be friends with benefits because he had to have sex with me at some point, which was promptly followed by a request to meet up. I thought of the best response to that level of sudden weirdness that caught me off guard was no response at all, which is usually a pretty clear no if everything I had said before hadn't been. He didn't stop, even after an hour of silence from me. In fact, he got creepier. He accused me of teasing him, and then said that we were going to have sex whether I was playing his game or not. At this point, I was pretty panicky because it sounded like he was going to rape me, but I tried to calmly respond in case I was getting things out of hand in my head and reading it wrong, or in case he was generally thinking I was just playing hard to get. So on the off chance it was a misunderstanding, I spelled it out for him, telling him clearly that I was ignoring him because I wasn't interested. His follow-up chilled me to the bone. He accused me of being a bitch because I was mad about Sunday still, then told me that if I didn't go meet him, he was going to come around when you're home alone and get what I want. At this point, I felt like I didn't know him at all anymore, and I couldn't predict if he was being serious or not, so I got scared and decided I should get the police involved. I told him this in the hope that he would back off now, but he didn't. He seemed to find it funny and told me, "By the time they manage to do anything, you'll be mine." At this point, I thought I wasn't safe in my home, and I got out. I packed some emergency things and drove to my parents' house, an address my ex was thankfully unaware of. Once I got there, I showed my father the messages I had been sent, and he took me to the police station for moral support and because he was very angry at the time. The police did patrols of my house that night because they were concerned about break-ins after the threats to come get me, but happily no one ever tried to break in. Even so, they took my ex in for questioning in the morning. A police officer handling this got in touch with me much later in that day and told me that they had adequate evidence from me and detaining and questioning him for me to press charges, currently planning to charge him with sexual harassment and threatening behavior. After that, he was released on bail with a condition of not contacting me. I wish I could say that that was the end of it. 2 days after the original texts were sent, I worked the breakfast shift at the cafe I worked in, and not long after I arrived, some flowers with a card were delivered. The delivery person was clearly given my name since he asked for me by name. The card was the creepy part, though it was a written to order thing and probably toned down quite a bit in comparison to what he might have written me personally. It still made my skin crawl. First off, it started by calling me love, referred to the incident as just a falling out, apologized. Like that would make me feel better. But then said that I should apologize to him too, because we both took it too far. Then said that I would be happier if we got together again. It wasn't signed by name, but it isn't too hard to tell who it was. I did report it to the police, but they didn't have much that they can do either, given the lack of proof that it was his. I've also had similar issues with social media, some weird Facebook friend requests that I deleted thinking it was from him, but nothing serious, thankfully. All I can really say to finish this, or at least hopefully finish this, since I'm praying this is a non-ongoing story, is Creepy X. I've got pepper spray, and I'm staying with my parents, where I can reach my dad's gun, so it's probably in both of our interests not to meet again, until I take you to court, that is. Edit. I've added some updates in the comments below, but I've received messages from people who missed the important bits of information. The first thing I have to add is that, following the advice of some of the wonderful people on here, I called the florist that sent me the gift and explained the situation. Told me that he didn't give out personal information, whether I had boyfriend troubles or not, so I spoke to the police officer handling my case, who, by the way, couldn't have been better, very understanding and professional at the same time. He went into the shop in person. Needless to say, they do give out customer details if a policeman asks, and surprise surprise, it was my ex, so that counts as bail violation, and he's back in custody for the time being. Another more recent update. 3 days after he was taken into custody again, I went back to my usual residence, seeing that he wasn't a threat anymore. I was still nervous though, so I went with my dad. When we got in, it was evident that a lot of mail had been shoved through the letterbox while I was away. Some of it was genuine stuff, but most of it was reams and reams of crumpled up paper, not sent via the mailman, as none of it was in envelopes, and it looked like someone had just shoved it in. There was also a small parcel, gift paper, with no labels, which set off alarm bells, especially when I read some of those letters. They basically read like him going mental on paper. Pages and pages of rambling about how we're meant to be. He can't live without me. I'm being silly, selfish, and stupid for not giving him a second chance. One part sticks in my mind where he swore he wasn't going to let this go no matter what. After that, I was super uncomfortable and not sure why I stayed there. Even though he was in custody and I was pretty much safe, I put off committing to stay or leaving, just hung out with my dad for a while, deliberately not opening the parcel. I wasn't sure if I wanted to know what kind of things he sent me after what I read, but eventually I did open it. That's how I decided to go back to my parents' house for a while, just for comfort, because inside that small box, wrapped with a couple layers of paper, the paper was another long, rambling letter that unnerved me. He went to great lengths to tell me that, although we make mistakes and both of us took it too far, he would love me forever if I apologized to him and stopped acting stupid. We can just forget what happened between us and start over again, as husband and wife. His words, not mine. Yes, he seriously proposed to me like that. Yes, the box had an engagement ring in it. It was a pretty ring, but I know I'd never be comfortable wearing it. No, I'm not going to marry him. I'm going to add this to the growing list of evidence I'm showing to the police and the court. Update again. Sadly, I announced that there's a part 2. The incident that creeped me out happened on Wednesday, 1st of August. I was leaving work and there's a man sitting on a car's bonnet across the street. The car gave me an odd sense of deja vu that I couldn't place. But I figured, whatever, maybe he's a regular or something, and he's just waiting for someone. I kept walking, only to be distracted by someone calling out, in a broken accent attempt at my first language, "Hey, hey you." I turned around to see what was going on, whether he was talking to me or not. He was standing on the road now, pointing at me, and he beckoned when he saw me look at him, but I stood my ground. I wasn't going to walk out onto the road to have a conversation with someone I didn't even know, so I asked him, "Do I know you?" in case I just failed to recognize him or something. Obviously, this amused him somehow because he laughed at me, shaking his head. Now this encounter had gone from a little out of the ordinary to very weird to me, and given the recent events with my ex-boyfriend, I was quite paranoid, so I turned more aggressive and confrontational than I otherwise would have, and demanded that he tell me why he stopped me and if we knew each other. "No reason," he shrugged. "Your name is, right?" At that point, I freaked out and just started walking quickly away. I wanted to get away from this odd man who knew my name and wouldn't say what he wanted. As I left, I heard him laugh again. The way he did was weird and unpleasant. Then he yelled, "Alright, see you next week." At this point, I really didn't want to meet him ever again, but it didn't end there. That is, I didn't see him again, but the car remained across the street, basically not moving at all for 2 days. Today, I decided to check the plates. I know that may make it seem a little creepy too, but here's my reasoning. I was a little nervous that it might be my exes. We didn't date for a long time and I only saw his car a few times. All I really remembered about it was that he had personal plates. I was right. So it seems somehow my ex managed to send another creep to harass me while he's in custody, which just adds to the stress of the approaching court date. I'm not sure how he can encourage someone to harass me from custody where he currently is, but I'm not sure what he is and isn't allowed to do from where he is. Maybe I should get in touch with the police again. Update. The police have wheel clamped and taped off the car, then searched it. According to what the officer in charge of my case was able to tell to me, they found several guns, some of which are illegal where I live. My ex, who the car is registered to, does not have a gun registered in the first place, so they could all be illegal unless they are someone else's. The police are apparently looking for the other man by the description I gave them. Nothing else suspicious was found in the car as far as I've been told. Last update. The man I saw with the car came into my workplace today. I wasn't paying attention at first and went over to take his order. He grabbed my arm and asked me to go outside with him. That's when it clicked that this was the same guy. I pulled away from him. Fortunately, he wasn't holding me tightly and I'm strong enough to get out of his grip. Then I hurried in the back, in the staff-only area, and got my boss's attention. I told him what happened and he called the police. The man was gone by the time they arrived, but they found him a little later and took him in for questioning. He's been released with a warning. The firearms in his car weren't his, they were my ex's apparently, which scares me a little more. The man seemed generally bewildered by them, not sure if he's just a good actor or my ex didn't give him the true story. But from what he told the police, my ex told him that we were together and he persuaded him to help him do a fake kidnap prank to scare me. I am so glad that the court hearing is coming up. I was shaking and trying not to cry hearing the gory facts from the policeman handling my case over the phone though. I'm not sure how well I'll hold it together in court. Hopefully the conclusion. Today is my court hearing. He was originally charged with harassment and threatening behavior. In the light of other things, including police investigations and his friend confessing, he will also be charged with possession of illegal weapons, planned kidnapping, stalking, and failure to comply with bail. I can happily say that he's out of my way, as I have a restraining order and he has an 8-year prison sentence. This all started when I was 14, when my mom met her new boyfriend, who I'll call Ray. I remember the first time he met me and my siblings. He looked at my mom and said, "Oh wow, didn't know you had a gang," which looking back on was a very weird thing for him to say since he had been on a few dates with my mom and she told him exactly how many kids she had. Ray seemed like a normal guy at first. He was in his 40s and had 2 older sons from his last marriage, who sometimes came over for dinner. Things went wrong after he moved in. He would yell a lot and have loud arguments with my mom, throwing things at her, but he would always sweet talk his way around her afterwards, and this is probably why she didn't leave him sooner. But Ray found it difficult to get along with my siblings and me. He would complain about every little thing we did wrong and quickly became very controlling. But whenever we complained about how he was acting towards our mom, he would accuse us of trying to ruin their relationship. This worked pretty much every time since it would cause her to get angry and yell at us instead of him. As we got older, he stopped us from seeing friends he didn't like and wouldn't allow our friends to come over unless they had his approval first. I realized he was crazy when he picked me up from school one day, which he never did, and while driving home, he accused my sister of trash talking him behind his back. When I asked him how he knew that, he told me he had proof. When we got home, he showed us a tape recorder and played back a recording of my sister and I complaining about him in our bedrooms at night. I asked him why the fuck he put a recorder in our bedrooms, and we had a big argument. I immediately called my mom and told her. I made him remove all the tape recorders from our bedroom, but I'm convinced that he kept hiding them since he would sometimes bring up conversations that my sister and I had while he wasn't around. We were so paranoid that we would whisper and we would never talk about anything private in case he somehow overheard. We were so terrified that he might have also hid cameras as well. We would dress and undress super quickly, so if there were cameras, he wouldn't be able to see anything. It gets me angry thinking about the fear that we lived in while living there. When I was 16, I got a job at a fast food place, and Ray had a big problem with that as well. His reasoning for this was that my boyfriend at the time worked there, and he believed that I was just going to mess around with my boyfriend. So his way of checking on me was to come and sit in his car and record me. He did this for a month. He would show me the recordings, after which would lead to even more arguments, ending with 16-year-old me begging for a 40-year-old man not to stalk me at work. I was pretty much done at this point and moved in with my dad, who had just moved back. My dad was pissed when I told him about everything that was happening. He wanted to call the police on Ray, but my mom begged him not to. They broke up a few years later over something unrelated, so thankfully I never saw him again.